Assalamu alaikum and welcome to our new series, Psychology of Salah, a 10-part series where we're going to be analysing and reflecting upon the psychological aspects of our obligatory Salah. Not just the obligatory Salah, obviously there are other types of Salah as well, but we are focusing on the obligatory Salah that we have to do 5 times a day, and reflecting upon our presence of mind within that and how we can get more out of our Salah even within a short period of time. And again, my guest is Brother Ghulam Abbas Laka, who's going to take us through the stages of Salah. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I begin in the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful. Alhamdulillah, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we've had the opportunity to think about how we can get greater benefit from what we're already doing, and in particular regarding the psychology of Salah. When we think about the journey we've taken thus far, so beginning with wudu and the opportunities we have there for mindfulness, through to qibla and adhan, ikama, the process of formulating a niyyah, an intention, and the takbir al-ihram. We've covered a lot of ground, alhamdulillah, on the different opportunities we have for understanding aspects of ourselves, our thinking patterns, our behaviors, how we connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the different ways in which we do or we don't. And one of the consistent points we've made is that it's not about how much time we have. If we only have 10 minutes for lunchtime prayers, that's enough. Because it takes only a moment to formulate and establish a deep connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't take time. What it takes is our concentration. Now, when I say it doesn't take time, yes, the more time you spend doing it, the better you get at it. It's like working out a muscle. However, we should not allow ourselves to be deceived into thinking that just because we may be very busy, that the deeper opportunities of Salah are not available to us. They are available to us, regardless of how short the time may be. So let's move on. The next step in the journey is Kiyaam. So the stage in the Salah where we are standing, and the qira'at, the recitations that we engage in. And one of the key questions that arises is, why is it that in the first 2 rakats of every Salah we have to recite Surah Al-Hamd, Surah Fatiha, when we've got so many beautiful surahs in the Quran? Out of the 114, why this particular one? Well, we're not the first generation to ask this question. This question was raised throughout history, and a particular one, Imam Rada alayhi salam, when he was asked this question, and this is narrated by Shaykh al-Saduq in Man La Yakhtar al-Faqih. He was asked to explain the particular aspect of Surah Fatiha that means that this is what we recite at the beginning of the first 2 rakats. So we're doing it 10 times a day. So there's something special about this. He says, this is because you will not find anywhere else in the Quran something that includes such a collection of meanings and wisdom as you do in the Surah Fatiha. And so that there is, from that, an important source of reflection, this food for thought here for us, because it raises many questions. So firstly, what's in it for me? When I am reciting the same surah 10 times over the course of an entire day, how do I benefit? And do I benefit? There's a reflexive question here, because if I'm not benefiting from this Surah Fatiha, then maybe I'm not doing it in the way I'm supposed to be doing it. Maybe the benefit from Surah Al-Hamd, Surah Fatiha, in the first rakat of Fajr, in the early morning, may be a very different kind of benefit to the 10th one, in the second rakat of Isha at the end of the day. The nature of that Surah Fatiha may be different. So let's go deeper into what that means practically. But one of the narrations, the hadith we have from the Holy Prophet, peace upon him and his holy progeny, when he was reflecting upon the connection between Salah and Al-Hamd, he was saying just how Surah Fatiha is split between the first section being on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then, so, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, begin in the name of Allah, the merciful, the compassionate, the most merciful, the most compassionate. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. So all praise, indeed the very notion of praise, it's in the definite, alhamd. All praise to Allah, Rabbil Alameen, the Lord, and the Rabb here has aspects of the nourishing creator, of all of creation. And then the reiteration of Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. In case we missed it, in the first verse,
Yes.
it is repeated in the third verse that he is introducing himself as the most compassionate, the most merciful. And Sayyid Muhammad Tabatabai, in his exegesis al-Mizan, really goes into a lot of length into this. And he draws analogies akin to Rahma from Ar-Rahman being like the rain that falls on everyone and everything. Mm-hmm. It's unconditional.
Yeah.
So the idea that, I may not be able to get much from my salah because I'm such a miserable person, such a sinner, or so bad at time management, or so stressed, or whatever, because we give ourselves a hard time for being stressed as well.
Yeah.
So we become stressed about being stressed. So it just multiplies. And we think, if only I wasn't so stressed, I would really be able to have a deeper connection in our salah. Wow, something else I can beat myself up about. But the recitation of Surah Fatiha dissolves all of those tensions. Because when we think about the idea of Ar-Rahman, this is unconditional upon us. So it is like the rainfall. It falls on everyone and everything, regardless of their worth. And then Rahim is the special mercy for those who are trying their best to be on the path of connecting with Him, mm-hmm. of the Mu'minun. Now, so in terms of where that leaves us, that by the end of the third verse, we're very clear that the Lord to whom we are praying is the Lord of infinite mercy and compassion. So we should be inoculated, we should be vaccinated against beating ourselves up through the process, particularly if our thoughts deviate, to compassionately bring our thoughts back to the salah rather than beating ourselves up. But also to recognize that this is a sacred connection. This is a meeting between the beloved and the beloved in the venue that He has stipulated, the venue of salah. So this special meeting is happening in a sacred place. This is why we knock on the door to enter, the knocking being the takbirat al-ihram. And it's at the idea of Malik Yawmiddin, the one who is the owner of the notion of judgment and the day of judgment. So that when we judge as other people, we are arrogating to ourselves, arrogantly attributing to ourselves the power that is only to Allah.
Yeah.
So particularly if you look at the frequency with which we judge other people negatively, and we judge ourselves negatively. So when we look at the psychology of this idea of Maliki Yawmiddin can help us reduce the automatic negative thoughts, the ants that crawl over our mental landscape, that always kick in when particular things happen. So for example, if there's someone we don't like and they're saying something, we might misinterpret that. An automatic negative thought might kick in. Or about ourselves and our own abilities or our own limitations. So this idea of Malik, that actually He is the judge, so we relinquish, we relieve ourselves of that burden of constant judgment. And so that first section, we're told, is about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that really is an allegory towards the sajda in salah, where we have lowered ourselves down to His greatness. And then there's an intermediate verse, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. Notice the syntax of it. It's not na'budu, we worship, iyaka, you, because then that could mean we could worship any number of things. But instead, the verse is conditioned upon tawheed, saying iyaka, you and you alone. Iyaka na'budu, do we worship. And we bring it in the plural, according to the tafasir, the exegesis traditions, as a sense of respect for what we're talking about.
Right.
That worship is such a sacred notion that we bring it into the third, into the collective. Na'budu. وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ, and you alone do we seek help from. Now this is regarded as being the intermediate stage, where it is both about us and about him. So that's the ruku', where we have bowed towards him. And then the completion of the Surah Fatiha is then about the servant coming back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim, guide us to the straight path. Salat alladhina an'amta alayhim, the path of those who you have blessed. So there are some who are blessed, some who are not blessed.
Yeah.
We remember, our discussions are based on Surah Ma'un. فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ, woe upon those who pray. That's strange. Why? الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ sahun, that they are heedless about their prayers. And so this ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim from Surah Fatiha is about guidance to that straight path. And it's about us seeking that guidance. Salat al-lazina an'amta alayhim ghayril maghdubi alayhim wala-dhalin, not the path of those who have earned your wrath and who have gone astray. So there is a risk. So this is risk management as well. So we've got all these aspects within one surah, and this is the relationship between the surah and salah. That the first section is like the sajda, iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in, is the intermediate stage, the ruku', and then the ending of the verse is about us standing towards the Master. And so we have this idea of cycles, the rakats, and whereas we are from sujood, then we rise up again. And we also need to think about how we rise, because there's a powerful psychology to this. When we think about when we are on the ground, so a dozen times a day we get back up on our feet, how do we do that? And that is a subject that we really need to reflect upon in great detail, because it can help us in our daily lives.
I was going to say also that the rising, I mean, of course, in the books of Salah, there are also instructions on how we should rise as well. So it's not just what's happening internally, but also the manner in which we rise is very important as well.
We also need to think about how we get into the position of Kiyaam, that standing position. Because what is very interesting is that when we look at the dhikr that we recite, بِحَوْلِ وَقُوَّتِهِ أَقُومُ وَأَقُعُدُ, that by the power, by the strength of Allah, بِحَوْلِ وَقُوَّتِهِ, and His, so by His strength and by His power, أَقُومُ, I stand. Again, despite being down in the dirt, despite having been pushed into the ground by the events of my life, or by myself, by my own folly, I may have ended up on the ground. Regardless. So 12 times a day at least, we recite this, that behold Allah wa quwwatihi, that by His strength and with His power, aqumu, I stand again. So it's about building that resilience, that regardless of the number of challenges we find and how frequently we find them, we are able to stand again. And I said, so there is a cycle to it. But I think the psychology of Bihaulillah is incredibly powerful, because particularly the connection between our physical body and the state of our mind and what we're reflecting on in our hearts, because we are on the ground and we want to get back up to deliver what we can deliver, to stand and proclaim the qira'at that we wish to in the qiyam of the next rakat, of the next unit of the prayer. Yet, in our daily lives, how many times do we find that there are things we really want to achieve, but we are constantly thwarted in our ambitions, either by our own negligence, heedlessness, laziness, or our own tiredness and just basic natural limitations. Or we may be blocked by other people, or we may have resource limitations, we may have injustice to deal with. There are many issues. We may have health problems to face that preclude us from being able to do what we want to. Regardless, the psychology of this is so empowering. It gives us hope that, and we don't just say this once in a day, which is another aspect of the point of having the salah spread out during the day. You can't do all 5 prayers in one day.
Yeah.
You can't do all the 5 prayers of a day in one time.
Yeah.
At Fajr, for example. You have to separate them out so that we can reflect upon what are the ways in which I have fallen between the last prayer and this, so between the morning and the afternoon. So as I've been at work this morning, what are the different ways in which I may have fallen?
Yeah.
Fallen short of the niyyah that I had, of the intention that I had, so that I may be able to revisit that and remedy that. In our previous discussion, we were using the analogy of a fisherman with a boat. And it's really important for the fisherman to know if there are any holes in that boat, and to recognize where the water in the boat is maybe coming from. So to identify the hole, seal it, and then remove the water so that it becomes safe for them.
Yeah.
In our lives, we're drowning in different ways. We need to identify where the holes are in our boats. Salah gives us that opportunity, so that when we identify a hole in our boat, we don't start beating ourselves up about it. We remember the rahmah with which we began this qiyam, with which we began the salah, with reciting Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful. So when we identify a fault within ourselves, we remedy that with rahmah. Because if we are not merciful, we will create other problems in our own psychology. So for example, if the fisherman, when he identifies the hole in the boat, starts beating up the boat and making even more holes, we're going to create other problems down the road. So we need to fix that hole compassionately so as not to create other problems, such as low self-worth and self-esteem problems, because that's going to then manifest in other limitations that we create for ourselves. So we can never forget the importance of rahmah for gently escorting our actions, our thoughts, our cognitions, our behaviors back to the path that is straight, the ihdina salat al-mustaqim, straight in the sense of helping us achieve our niyyah of qurbatan ilallah, of proximity to Allah, but also with regard to what we say in the qunut of Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana, oh Allah, give me good in this world, as well as wa fil akhirati hasana, in the hereafter. So that when we want to experience good mental health, to be effective people, to achieve what we want to, we can never escape the importance of rahmah, and with that rahmah is the sabr. We discussed a few sessions ago the verse in Allah as-sabirin, that Allah is with the patient ones. Part of sabr is perseverance, and this is where the process by which we come back to Kiyaam, the beholdillah, is an exercise in resilience. Repeating that process by which we get back on our feet to once again try to achieve what truly inspires us.
And I was also thinking of tawakkul. So this is a big subject. Sometimes, again, when people's plans in life don't work out, they put all their hope in something, they were convinced it was the right decision, and disaster happens, and they think, does Allah not love me? Why has this happened? And so rebuilding the tawakkul, can take some time after that. So I guess this بِحَوْلِ اللَّهِ وَقُوَّتِهِ أَقُومُ وَأَقُودُ is also a reminder of Allah's power in our life, and the fact that we need to work on that tawakkul, to reflect on that, I guess.
So we see that the process of Qiyam is really about a total self-reflection, not just how we get to Qiyam in terms of the beholdillah and the strength that it's taken us to get there, but also when we think about what the verses mean. So we looked at the idea of rahmah from Surah Fatiha, and we need to also think about what that means for ourselves, because as we are reciting that prayer, we need to ask ourselves the extent to which we have had mercy upon ourselves during that time, between the last time we were engaged in prayer and now. So those intervening hours, what have we done in terms of how we've related to ourselves? And this is really about understanding and picking up on the automatic negative thoughts that permeate our thinking, identifying them and making sure that they don't cause long-term damage, that we are able to reinforce positive messages. And with that, we also consider the idea that we are not alone in dealing with these challenges. So one of the aspects of depression that many people report is loneliness.
Right.
And this is where the verse إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ can be really powerful. Because having acknowledged that you and you alone do we worship, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ, the إِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ is incredibly powerful. Because it highlights to us that we have been given permission to ask for help.
Yeah.
And often one of the sentiments that keep us locked in low mood and in negative thinking, which are separate but kind of are related, is the notion that we have no one to turn to. And often Muslims feel that they are not worthy of Allah's grace because of the mistakes they have made and the sins they've committed. And so religion itself becomes a source of negative thinking, which is really ironic, because when we look at the Salah, we are told to recite Surah Fatiha. And Surah Fatiha reiterates the mercy and the compassion of Allah. In the Bismillah, in the third verse, in the Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, and the point that we're not alone in embarking upon this journey. We have help. Such that, that when we think about إِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ, the psychology of that works at different levels. So first, that we actually have the permission to be able to ask. Second, to think about what is it that I want to ask help for.
Yeah.
And in that process, undertake an exercise in identifying what our needs are, do a needs assessment. And all too often we go through life not recognizing that we need help for certain things. So one of the issues we find in research is that Muslims are among the least likely to seek psychotherapeutic help for depression.
Right.
Now, we persevere without seeking the help we need. Now, we may think that, oh, if I just pray, that's enough. But actually, if I break my arm, I'm not going to say, oh, if I do salah, my arm will heal. I will go to the hospital to get my arm fixed, understanding that the ability for human beings to develop medical science is itself a form of rahmah, is a form of grace. So when I go to the hospital, it doesn't in any way become inconsistent with my prayer. It is a manifestation of my prayer. Similarly with mental health, if I'm feeling depressed, I can go and seek help. And if I'm prescribed medication to correct imbalances in my brain chemistry, then I should take that if I need to. But not asking for help and being falsely stoical is not a manifestation of rahmah. So this reminder of إِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ, you and you alone do we seek help from, it reminds us of that we need to seek help, and that sometimes his response of help is through the mechanisms that we have available to us through mental health, through family, through friends, through chaplains, etc. So that we do not need to remain locked in that state of loneliness. The third aspect of إِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ is hope. And when we look at the literature in positive psychology and in other areas, we see increasing evidence that those people who have a naturally hopeful, optimistic disposition have much better mental health outcomes. And I feel that one of the aspects of the rules requiring recitation of Surah Fatiha in each of the first two rakats of every prayer, which means 10 times a day, creates this inoculative aspect, this vaccine for our hearts, so that we do not feel forlorn and bereft and hopeless.
Yeah.
It should not be that a person who recites Surah Fatiha 10 times a day should be hopeless, should be in despair, because it means that we have not fully opened ourselves up to the benefit that is available to us. Now, this does not mean that anyone who is suffering from depression is therefore not a good Muslim. That's wrong. It is possible to be a very diligent, dutiful Muslim and experience depression. But so there may be reasons why we may be reciting the Surah Fatiha 10 times a day, but we still experience despair. That's why we need to start thinking about whether there is an issue in our brain chemistry that needs to be corrected with medication. Or maybe we need to embark upon a process of psychotherapy through CBT to help us realign so that we become more clear about the areas of our lives that we need to seek help for. And particularly helping ourselves, self-help, in being able to realign our lives with the Salat al-Mustaqim, with the straight path towards fulfillment. And also to think about the mindfulness that is required in Surah Fatiha. Because really it is a surah of devotion. It's very difficult to be truly devoted to something or someone that you are heedless of.
Yeah.
And this is why that verse from Surah Ma'un talks about woe upon those who are heedless. Because then even though you may be reciting the words of devotion, you may be doing it in a way that is heedless. And this is where the irony comes in, that we may be doing that which can be incredibly helpful to us, but blocking ourselves from benefiting from it.
And very good points about the hope. I think also an inculcating of humility as well.
Yes.
I think this is one of the things I liked about Islam when I was coming into Islam, is this, although there are, as the Holy Quran says, different levels of knowledge and different levels of spirituality, at the same time, the salah is what equalizes everyone. So whether you are wealthy, whether you are poor, whatever situation, condition you are in, whatever you think about yourself, whatever you think about other people, one must bow down to Allah. And there is that, I've mentioned this sense of liberation in sajda, but that letting go, like you say, seeking the help of Allah, is actually often the opposite of what a lot of people are told they should do, because you get a lot of these messages about take control of your life, and people are striving to be in control of their life. And we have talked about being in control of your responses to things, but there's this whole other discussion on being in control of other areas of your life, and that can, again, I guess, give a rise to many different kinds of anxieties and self-doubt, because, well, my life feels like out of control, so does that mean there's something wrong with me? And actually that letting go, that no, I cannot be in control of everything in my life, and there is a higher power that is operating in my life, and like you say, it's okay for me to ask for that assistance and to acknowledge that no, I'm not all powerful, no, I can't have control over everything.
And it's okay for things to go wrong.
Yeah.
It's okay for me not to get everything right all the time, because if that was the case, there would be no notion of iyyaka nasta'in. I would not need help for anything if I was able to be fully in control of everything and to do everything perfectly as I'm perfectly supposed to. I mean, that's fantasy.
Yeah.
So the point about Alhamd is that it allows us to really root ourselves in what is rather than what should be, what can be, what ought to be. This is the reality I am in. And the first step towards navigating out of a mess is recognizing where we are.
Yeah.
And in that process to also then recognize that we've got help to deal with it. Such that the overall psychology of Kiyaam is this balance. This balance of humility and letting go with the takbirat al-ihram. That Allahu Akbar, that Allah is the greatest in terms of the ultimate of our objectives, the connection with Him. But equally, He has bestowed upon us abilities that we should be hopeful for being able to manifest. So there is this balance between seeking help and then being confident and hopeful that He will help us to manifest the abilities that He has given us. That's why we stand with confident humility. And it's this balance of confidence and humility, this hope versus a sense of responsibility. So we're balancing hope and responsibility. We're balancing confidence with humility so that we're standing straight, not leaning. And if you look at actually some of the fiqh rules, the legal rules about salah, we're told that in Kiyaam we should stand straight. And there is a psychology to that straightness of recognizing that we shouldn't be leaning back or leaning forward too much. And what I mean by leaning back is being too laissez-faire and just becoming passengers in our own car. So allowing other people, the media, peer pressure, to push us into the back seat, and we just take a back seat and somebody else drives our car for us, taking us into actions that we don't really want to do, making us behave in ways that we don't want to behave. Or indeed leaning too far in and becoming anxious and being too stressed about not being able to change things that we want to straight away. So it's one of the concepts we see in psychotherapy is reactiveness.
Right.
So reducing the extent to which we are automatically reactive to something. That's one of the aspects of mindfulness practice, that we can create the space mentally to observe what is happening without becoming automatically reacting to it. Mm-hmm. And that reducing that reactiveness gives us the space to stand straight and not to be sucked into and pushed around by the events of our lives. So that by truly experiencing what is available in the psychology of Kiyaam, we can maintain a sense of tranquility in our lives and balance the events of our lives that we may not have control over, in some cases, versus our experience of our life that we can have control over. Even if the events are not what we like, our reactiveness to that is in our control. And so our experience of our lives can remain in that state of rahmah that is promised in Surah Fatiha.
Inshallah. We've just got a couple of minutes till the end, and I was thinking also the standing straight often correlates in my mind as well with, you know, the Salat al-Mustaqim. So you're standing on the prayer mat, you are facing a certain direction, you are aligning yourself, and you are also talking about the Sirat al-Mustaqim, so that, yeah, I mean, physically and mentally, you are aligned or seeking to be aligned on that Sirat al-Mustaqim. Of course, also, I don't know what you think about the final line about, you know, not those on whom, you know, there is the wrath of Allah, whether one should have that fear. So there's that balance of hope and fear as well. Guide us on the path of those who you have blessed, not, you know, in the way of those who have incurred the wrath of Allah.
Well, there are theological aspects to that, but there are also psychological aspects to that. So our discussions in this series are about the psychology of salah.
Yeah.
So theologically, there are many aspects of what you say, of غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِينَ. However, from a psychological point of view, we often inflict hell upon ourselves.
Yeah.
Which is why in dua, for example, in Dua Kumel, Imam Ali Islam guides us with the warning of ظَلَمْتُ nafsi, that I have been a tyrant upon myself. So I have created that hell on earth for myself. And the extent to which we can separate events from our experience of those events can put us in control of the extent to which we may create hell for ourselves and for other people.
Yeah. So to conclude and to think about the whole surah itself, it is a very interesting point that you made as well about being merciful to ourselves. Sometimes when I say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, I do feel a sense of Allah's mercy in those words, but I haven't consciously thought I need to be more merciful to myself. I mean, I think that's something that doesn't occur to people many times. I mean,
and there's a confidence to it as well. And that confidence is manifested by the freedom we have in Salah.
Yeah.
So whilst the first surah is prescribed, the second surah is we're free with. So if, for example, we can recite that which inspires us, even if it's a short surah like Surah Qul Huwallahu Ahad, Surah Tawheed, the teaching says, for Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam has taught that when you recite Surah Qul Huwallah in Salah in particular, do not do it in one breath. So even though there are just a few words in Surah Qul Huwallah, it's such a short surah, just a couple of verses, but the recommendation is not to do it in one breath so that we may pause and reflect upon that. And reflect upon the mercy and the rahmah that lies therein, but also the confidence that we can choose the path that we take even with our salah in terms of the surah we recite, provided we do it with the requisite level of mindful awareness and presence of heart and mind.
Inshallah. Thank you very much, and we pray that we will improve in our presence of mind through the grace of Allah and Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Thank you very much, and thanks again for watching. Inshallah, we have a number of programs in this series, 10 in total, so do look out for the next program which will be broadcast. These will also be loaded up online, and you can access any one of these programs, inshallah, online as well, to go through the whole series and all of the components of the prayer. So we will see you, inshallah, in the next program. Assalamu alaikum.
Ahlul Bayt TV, the holy household for every household.